Hey everybody, have you considered starting a podcast? We here at Screwball give Podbean a high level of recommendation. Podbean has given us the ability to easily bring you Screwball each and every week on all of your favorite podcast services. Use the link podbean.com/screwball to sign up and save up to 35% annually. You can also use the link podbean.com/pro/screwball to sign up for a business subscription. Happy podcasting. Hey everybody, welcome back to Screwball, a baseball podcast, your home for everything baseball. I'm your host Mike Lepre, here with my co-host Frank White.
Hey, how's it going?
We hope everyone out there is enjoying the offseason as much as you can. As we said 2 weeks ago, we are bringing you a top positions list, and we're going to bring it to you every other week, as you probably have already figured out. And we're going to go around the diamond numerically. And so we are going to start our first episode with starters, starting pitchers, and relief pitchers. We both made a list independently. We didn't talk about each other's lists until we just got together to record here. So, neither of our lists were influenced by each other. We just based off our stats and knowledge of baseball and all that stuff. So I'll put a little disclaimer in for that. Both of us used different metrics as to how we would, do the list. We didn't have one uniform, 5 things to consider making this list. So also consider that as well. So let's just jump right into it with our starting pitching list. And I think it's best to just start with some honorable mentions. Maybe just get some guys out of the way that, didn't quite make our list, but we think are worth mentioning and are definitely there's going to be some names here that would probably be on your guys' top 10 list, but for us, these are our honorable mentions. So I'm just going to run through, just because I have a little more than you, so I'm just going to run through 4 that I don't think you have, but I'm just going to run through them anyway. Just let me know if I overlap a little bit. So just some honorable mentions I have are Grover Cleveland Alexander, Burt Blyleven, Bob Feller, and Whitey Ford, I believe, are some that I have, just going through the list here. But what are some honorable mentions that you got that I didn't list, or
Sure.
what do you got?
Some honorable mentions I have that I found hard pressed to leave off my top 10 list, but had to include Jim Palmer, Juan Marichal, Warren Spahn, who go look at his stats. Sandy Koufax, Christy Mathewson, Gaylord Perry, and Ed Plank.
I like it.
Yeah, Ed Plank. You guys should really go look up his stats as well. I don't think anyone really talks about Ed Plank or even knows Ed Plank, and he had a hell of a career. So
That just about covers my honorable mentions. Without I don't want to spoil the list too much, because there are me and Frank do have a lot of similarities in our list, but there are 2 guys in particular that I have on my list that he doesn't, and vice versa. But the rest of the list, 8 of them are similar. So I think going into this, we kind of knew that the lists would be pretty similar, just different orders. We kind of knew our guys. So I'm just going to go, since I'm already, I already kind of got my list right here. I'm just going to start with my guy, and we'll go back and forth. I'll start with 10 and go up. Number 10, just to piss Frank off, right off the bat. My number 10 guy, maybe a little surprise to a lot of you, is Clayton Kershaw. Now, this list, we're not going to go too deep into stats. We could be here all day if we get into the nitty-gritty of these guys' stats and if you want to get analytical, ERA plus and BABIP and whatever the hell these analytic terms are. But Clayton Kershaw, if you guys really do look at the stats, now obviously it comes with a caveat that his career's not over yet. He could go out there and the rest of his career have a 6 ERA, and that just is what it is. But up to this point, I believe Clayton Kershaw on my list is number 2 or number 3 lowest ERA on my list. Through this point in his career, has probably, I think he's top 4 in lefty strikeouts, top 5, something like that. I could be wrong. WAR up into his career, based on my list at the time of their career, I think he's second based on WAR. He's got, an MVP, he's got Cy Youngs, all that. He's got the accolades along with a lot of these guys. But I think that Clayton Kershaw, if you're not even considering him for your list, I think he is worth at least taking a look at, and at least being maybe in your top 25, top 20, top 15, something like that. So, but I think Clayton Kershaw is my number 10, and I think that by the end of his career, he could be top 3 lefties of all time. And that's just to piss Frank off. I had that.
Sure. So, I don't think he's a top 10 pitcher. We're not able to mention, and he's a good pitcher. He's had a good career, but I don't think you can look at all the starting pitchers we've had in baseball and be like, that's my guy. Not yet, at least. I don't know if he continues to pitch, but I'm not gonna. I don't want to get into it too much because we could be here all day. But I mean, yeah, you can argue that he could be put on there. I mean, I wouldn't. there's just so many other guys, older pitchers, that were just so dominant all the time. But it's a good pick. My number 10 is Roger Clemens. They said he took steroids. He fought it. Somehow they said he didn't take steroids, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. Not yet. But you can look at his numbers. I mean, what's he got? 7 Cy Youngs.
Something like that, yeah.
Intimidating on the mound. His career was very long. The only thing you could say was his playoffs and his those stats weren't that great. But unbelievable pitcher with the stats to back him up. And if it wasn't for some steroid allegations and not being liked by the media, he's probably top 2 or 3 starting pitcher of all time. So
yeah, sure.
I got him at 10 because of some of those allegations and some of the other stuff. But I mean, his numbers, as all these guys do, speak for themselves. So.
Yeah, Roger Clemens, I'm going to get to in a little bit, so I don't want to talk too much on him. But you're going to hear from me a little bit shortly here with Roger Clemens, and I have a lot of similar issues, kind of where I wanted to put him on the list. So I'll get to that in a bit. But my number 9 is Cy Young, and I think that in a top 10 list, I had a problem placing Cy Young. I originally didn't even really want to put him on my list, but I'm like, man, he has the all-time wins, innings, all-time decisions. Yeah, he does have more losses than anybody, but when you consider the innings and the workload the guy was put on, I think it's really hard to keep him off your list. It depends on also, if you're making a list where you want more older guys, you want less older guys. Me personally, I don't like to put a whole heck of a lot of the older guys because I don't think a lot of them translate to every generation of baseball. But I think Cy Young is one of those guys where if you picked him up, plucked him out of the 19-teens and 1920s or whatever, 1906, the early 1900s, you pick him up and threw him down in 2020, he could probably pitch pretty effectively. That's obviously completely subjective. We don't know that, but I think that he is one of those guys that could translate a little bit. And so, yeah, I mean, we have the award named after him, so it's hard to keep him off.
Yeah, I don't know how you got him down there, but I don't know. I'll go into it later, I guess. But yeah, he's awesome. But number 9 on my list is I got Nolan Ryan. He's a guy who a lot of people's lists you could probably see him higher, but the reason I didn't put him up higher, and a lot of things I used for my list were longevity, a little bit of playoff success, career numbers, dominance, and would you want him? Does he pop off the page when you look at your name and go, I'm going to build a team, or I want starting 5 rotation of all guys, all pitchers? Do you say, I want him on my team? So that's why that's where a lot of my names are come from. But the reason I got him so low is because a lot of walks, a lot of losses, wild. He did pitch, he pitched a long time. He just never could find wins and World Series wins and career success and rings and trophies. I don't think he ever won Cy Young either.
I think you're right.
So somehow he never won an award, but never could win that World Series either. So that kind of puts him down towards the bottom. And he had a lot of losses I don't think people really consider. I mean, no-hitters. He had about 9 no-hitters and 12 one-hitters and 38 two-hitters or something like that. I mean, ridiculous stats.
Yeah.
And pitched for 50 years. But just that lack of winning a World Series, I think, hurts him. And then, obviously, losses being up a little higher than people and walks being up a little higher. That's kind of why I have him 9, which is a great spot for him.
Oh, yeah.
But, you can easily, on a lot of people's lists, are probably top 5 and, 2, 3, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I do have him a little higher. I don't necessarily disagree, though, with the placing, because not to say Nolan Ryan's overrated, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's an overrated pitcher, but exactly what you said, a little bit higher walks, decisions, the lack of the accolades, the World Series, the things like that, especially for a guy that was so dominant in his era. He really was like
every era.
And he did pitch forever. But yeah, I do. I don't want to spoil my list, but I do have him close to your spot. But I think that Nolan Ryan is maybe people get a little caught up in the name more than when you actually digest his stats a little bit.
Sure.
My number 8, a little close to a guy we talked about earlier for you, is Roger Clemens. A lot of the same things that you said, I with the steroid stuff and a lot of the allegations and the kind of asterisk at this point that's next to his name. I had a really hard time putting him a lot higher on my list above a lot of the guys that, as you'll see, were just really dominant for their era. Didn't have a lot of most of these guys didn't have a lot of questions surrounding their performance and what could have attributed to it. Granted, there's a reason he's number 8 on my list. I'm not going to sit here and bash the guy, but I think that had there not been a lot of that or around him, and I'm pretty sure he never failed a test. I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah, and he went to court and they never proved that he took steroids.
Yeah, so
compared to Bonds, where they proved that he was on them, just couldn't prove that he knew he took them.
Yeah, so legally, I mean, technically speaking, the guy we don't know.
Which I always found surprising. I'm like, well, he never took them, so why are we still kind of bashing him like he did?
Yeah.
Well, not saying he didn't take them, but he got proved not taking them. So I was like, we should kind of treat him somewhat questionable, but still be like, okay, well, he won.
Yeah.
He's right.
Yeah.
Technically, so.
Yeah, I mean, but other than that, I mean...
He's like OJ'd.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. But to put a little more positive spin on Roger Clemens, I mean, a dominant pitcher, really workhorse out there, really wanted the ball in big games. Especially, when he was with the Yankees, they were really good during that time. Personality-wise, obviously, I think he probably takes a little bit of a bump there, too. Obviously, you shouldn't consider it, but there is in your mind a little bit more positivity around some other guys, that you off the field admire a little more. So Roger Clemens for me, just number 8 falls a little short, but your top 10 pitcher. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at,
Yeah. So my number 8 was actually a guy you mentioned earlier as your honorable mention, and that's Bob Feller. I got Bob Feller at number 8 because threw the ball so hard.
Oh yeah.
He was so dominant. He was a disgusting pitcher, and he struck everybody out all the time. And he missed 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
He led the league in strikeouts, I think, 3 years in a row. Then went to World War II for 4 years. Came back and then led the league in strikeouts like 7 more times in a row.
Unreal.
He was unbelievable and missed 4 years in the earlier prime of his career, and he still had ridiculous stats. He just was a dominant pitcher, and you could just go to war and fight for a country and a cause, and then come back and dominate in a and when you compare the two, a silly sense.
Yeah.
When you go to war and fight for world peace, essentially what they did, and then come back and dominate in a sillier sense in a game, but was dominant and just dominant before and after, and he just threw so hard. Was one of the original velocity guys.
Oh yeah.
That you can actually have record of. So that's why I got him on there. A guy that I was learning about, and a guy that I actually got an autograph for. So I had to put him on there because he was just that. I mean, it's Bob Feller.
Yeah.
He was just that good. So you had him on your honorable mention, which is can't argue. But I got him at number 8 because I want him. So.
Yeah, Bob Feller was great. I think a guy that actually gets a little lost in time. I think I think a lot of people kind of neglect to mention him in the top starting pitching conversation, and I think that he was, like you said, fastball dominant, strikeout wise dominant. I mean, he was Bob Feller for his time was really good, and he's a guy, and this is a consideration I had for a lot of my guys on the list. Can they pitch in any era? Bob Feller could pitch in any era. Yeah. Just straight up.
Give him those 4 years.
Oh yeah.
Give him what he was putting up in 4 years. He's probably right at the top of everyone's list. He's probably top 5.
Yeah,
because his numbers were that good, and then he missed 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar situation when we get there. And at some point, and you get to the Ted Williams numbers and stuff like that. You take 4 years out of the middle of their careers. It's like saying you take 4 years. Give Trout 4 years in the middle here. Like let's say COVID shut the baseball down for 4 years or whatever, and then he comes back as dominant again. That's 4 years. It's not like he missed a season or 2 seasons. Just like an injury, you could say, oh, this is 4 years without really having any say in it.
That could be
and then coming back and dominating. So that's 20 wins. Let's say at least 20 wins. That's 80 more wins.
Mm-hmm.
Just at least 20, because at that time you're putting up 25, 26 wins.
Mm-hmm.
And 200 something strikeouts.
Yeah,
300 strikeouts.
Guys were even still putting up 30 wins.
Yeah, and his stuff he probably could have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he would certainly have cracked my list if that were the case.
Oh yeah.
This is where in my mind, really when my list starts to tighten, like where the 1 through 7 are really interchangeable. You could put them just about anywhere, and I think that kind of is really appropriate with my number 7 pick is Bob Gibson, who in all facets, I mean, just an unreal dominant guy. I mean, fiery on the mound, probably the most pound for pound, probably one of the most fiery competitors on this list. Probably number 1, number 2 with another guy we'll get to later.
Well,
but
the guy I think we just mentioned, Roger Clemens.
Oh yeah, that's true. But Bob Gibson, I mean, just holds the record, for the ERA record, I think, for a single season. I'm pretty sure still, unless there's some ridiculous 1880 two toes Kennedy, through a .7 ERA or something. But yeah, I mean, the ERA title, what he did for baseball, and what he did for the Cardinals, World Series, playoff dominant. I'm pretty sure he had, a 17 strikeout game or something like that in the World Series.
He has a World Series record still for that.
So, I mean, just what can you say about Bob Gibson that already hasn't been said? And that's why I got him number 7. And if you wanted to put him at number 2, number 3, number 4, anywhere in there, that's fine with me.
Yeah,
I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'll get into him later because he's a legend and an unbelievable. I don't even know what else you could say about him. He's just. I find it weird that you got him at 7. We happened to lose him recently.
Yeah.
The guy I have 7, we also lost recently, and that's Tom Seaver.
That's weird. I didn't even think about that.
So I find that a little weird. Tom Seaver was Tom Terrific or Terrific Tom. Or I don't remember exactly which way that goes, but Mr. Met, he's probably the best Met of all time.
Oh yeah.
One of the best pitchers of all time. Obviously, got him at 7. Dominant. Played with some not great teams, and was still really good, which doesn't really get credited so much when you look at it and go, well, his team was terrible, but it didn't bother him. Likeable guy. We lost him recently. Stretching so far and the knee touching the ground was iconic.
Yep.
His impact on the game, his impact on the Mets. I mean, he really saved, or not saved, but helped get the Mets off the ground.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Tom Seaver, one of the best pitchers. I think he gets lost in the shuffle because he's not that. To a lot of people, it doesn't jump off the page. Even to me, I see his name, I go, yeah, he was really. But he never that excitement when I go, oh man, like I say Bob Feller. I mean, that excites you.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Tom Seaver, I mean, he was great,
Mm-hmm.
but I never felt that real excitement. But I mean, I know how good he is, and everyone knows how good he is. That's why I got him 7 here on the list.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame we lost. Like you said, it's funny that we've got them both at 7. It's a shame we lost both him and Bob Gibson the same year. But yeah, I see what you mean. He doesn't jump off the page immediately, but when he's another guy, you digest his stats a little bit and you look at it, it's like, oh my god, this guy was just unreal.
You put him with Carlton.
Yeah,
as you like to say, Steve Carlton, another one when no one really gives him credit, but Seaver they give credit, but it doesn't excite you, that name.
Yeah,
for some reason. I think it's just because you're like, well, he's just really good, and everyone just kind of knows it. And he just kind of went about his business. There was no fighting, there was no arguing, there was no, just kind of played and was really good and kind of moved on. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of what happened. Yeah, I don't know. But he obviously, he's one of the greatest pitchers. I'm taking him on my team whenever. So.
Oh, yeah. Let's move on because I'll get to him in just a second. But number 6, as you previously mentioned, I got Nolan Ryan. I mean, what more is to say that I haven't said about Nolan Ryan yet? But the no-hitter record, the one-hitter, two-hitter, how many games he threw there. I mean, it's hard to not put him in your top 10. I think you would be hard pressed not to have him somewhere in that upper echelon of pitchers. Especially, there's a lot of stories of him. He worked harder than everyone in that weight room and trying to be in shape to be able to pitch as long as he did. And
he pitched until he literally couldn't pitch no more. His last pitch, his arm gave out, similar to what we've seen in CC.
Yeah,
he pitched until his arm gave out, and then he walked off and never got back on.
Yeah,
and then he did what he did off the field or after his playing days, which owning the Rangers and being a big part in the Rangers and stuff like that also it was a lasting impact.
Yeah, and the guy just at least now just never seems to smile. So it's dead serious demeanor. So, but that speaks to, I mean, there's one particular instance that you can think of Nolan Ryan with Robin Ventura.
Yeah, I was gonna say iconic moments.
Yeah.
The Astrodome. Pitching in the Astrodome, pitching with the colorful Astro jerseys, I always remember. But the picture I always think of Nolan Ryan is always the one with the blood on his face. Yep. He's on the mound. I don't care what anyone says. He's out there. Oh, that was like him.
Sure.
If you had to pick one picture about who is he, what explains or what describes him, here, and you're like, oh, all right, yeah.
Yeah. When you went to say it, I knew I was like the blood. Yeah. It's got to be.
Yeah, that's the picture. That's that, or what's it when he's holding like Doesn't he have like a picture where he's holding like 5 different balls in his hand?
Yeah, it's like the no hitters, all the ones he's got them all in his hands, like 7 of them or something.
Yeah, that one I always think too, because it's like, all right, so he could just hold like a bucket of baseballs at once.
Yeah,
I know. All his no hitter balls. All right.
Yeah, what the hell?
Yeah, so that's another. But yeah, so he's just an iconic figure.
Yeah,
and with the World Series here or there, and a Cy Young here or there, he's number 1.
Yeah, you could shoot him up the list. Yeah,
but great spot though. I mean, I can't argue with it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna argue with it. So my number 6 on my list here is good old Lefty Grove. And he was a righty. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
But Lefty Grove, one of the best left-handed pitchers of all time. I have him. Technically, you want to look at my list. He's the second best left-handed pitcher of all time. Just dominant. I mean, it seems silly to say with all these guys, but they're just dominant. That was our main thing was dominant when they pitched. Dominant for me was longevity, consistency. These guys did that. I mean, he had numbers that just they don't make sense.
Yeah.
And you could say a little bit older, but he kind of pitched in the teens into more of the live ball era into the 20s with Babe Ruth and kind of where baseball kind of, got its shape for a long period of time. Some of the older guys in the early 1900s and even late 1800s, baseball really didn't have its shape yet. It was still newer, dead ball and stuff like that. Once you got to the teens and the 20s, baseball kind of had its shape for the next 50, 60 years.
Yeah, the rise of Babe Ruth, really.
Yeah, so he pitched with that. So that's why, you can kind of count him as kind of the old pitcher, but still kind of pitched in that newer era or, that live ball era where it's like, okay, baseball kind of, these stats kind of make sense now compared to when you look at guys like Cy Young and, old Hoss Radbourn who had like 90 wins in one season. Those stats don't make sense, But Lefty Grove, I mean, what else can you say about him? He's arguably the best left-handed pitcher of all time. I got him at number 2, and he was just dominant. He was just dominant. He was that dominant presence on the mound, and it was just, I don't know. You couldn't beat him.
No.
He was hard to beat.
Yeah. He's one of the guys I left off my list that, when you consider the older pitchers, I left them off my list because I didn't want to, the older pitchers for me are a little bit of a hard sell with being able to they're interchangeable when you're making a list with I have Clayton Kershaw on here, is it like, can you put them in every era? But Lefty Grove is one of those guys where, unfortunately, he's not on my list, but, I mean, he was awesome. He's top, at the very worst, he's top 3 in lefties of all time. At his very worst, you gotta have him top 3. And, like you said, you look at some of the stats, it's almost hard to believe. And like I said earlier with Cy Young, it's just hard to believe some of these stats with these older guys. But they're there, and like you said, he pitched a little bit more into that live ball era with Ruth and Jimmy Fox and Gehrig and those guys. So, it starts to get a little, his stats are a little bit more representable than 3-finger Mordecai Brown, so.
Yes. Brown.
Yeah. Number 5 for me is Tom Seaver. You had him just a tad lower than me, but I think Tom Terrific is top 5 pitcher. I think that he embodied, like you said, I think he's the best Met of all time. He embodied, being in that big New York market and trying to establish that New York market for the Mets. You look at his WAR, you look at his wins, strikeouts, those kind of big stats that you look at, and it's hard to avoid his dominance in his era, his dominance over a long period of time. You could, again, with what I go back to, you could put him in any era. If you drop Tom Seaver in 2020, he'd be just fine, I think. And I think that, losing him obviously is a shame, but off the field, you could see that he was a nice guy. He represented baseball well, represented the Mets well. I think that contributes to my placing on the list. And like you said before, he doesn't really jump off the page at you when you look at Tom Seaver. But man, he was really good. And like I said, he just cracks that top 5 for me over Nolan Ryan and Bob Gibson and the others. He just cracks that top 5.
Yeah, and one more thing with Tom Seaver, what you could say, which really shows you how important they were and how good they were and how impactful they were. Mets fans, even younger ones, even our age, 20 years old, 25 years old, 15 years old, they knew who he was, know who he was, and liked him. And almost knew exactly who he was, like they watched him, even though they never did. Or even came close to watching him. And that's how you really know the impact of somebody.
Yeah.
So he really had that impact on Mets fans and people around baseball.
Sure.
Even though they never watched him.
Yeah, that's it.
Never watched him.
Yeah, we never watched him, but damn, do we know about him?
Sure. And the impact that he had.
Yeah.
So my number 5 is one of my personal favorite pitchers of all time. Love him.
Mm-hmm.
Love him to death. That's Greg Maddux. I'm going to come right out and say he's number 5. I know some of his postseason stats are not great. They're not, Kershaw bad, but they're not great. He struggled, but longevity.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about
forever.
it. Yeah.
What do you have? 10 Gold Gloves as a pitcher.
Oh, yeah.
His accuracy is he's probably number 1 most accurate pitcher of all time. Starter or reliever, I don't care. He could pitch in any era. He throw 80 miles per hour. It doesn't matter. He could throw 90 miles per hour. He never threw hard.
Mm-hmm.
He never said a word. Dominant. He just was always the same. Motion was always the same. Technique was always the same. He really invented the front door two-seamer, even though he never threw hard.
Mm-hmm.
He threw change-ups to lefties when people never really did that. He did a lot of things no one ever did,
mm-hmm.
and never beat you with velocity. He beat you with his smarts, his accuracy, and you had to really outsmart him, which was never going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
sure.
Greg Maddux is one of my favorite pitchers of all time. He can still pitch. He really can still pitch.
Sure.
And then you see him talking, and he's very well liked, very well spoken. Knows the game, just unbelievable, and just one of my favorite pitchers. And I got him number 5. Man, who wouldn't want him in his rotation? The only blip in his thing is some of his postseason. If it was for a little bit better postseason, he's probably up my list another couple spots. I also got a bunch of guys on here who are really hard to take off, but
yeah,
he would probably bump up another spot or 2 if he had a little bit better postseason career. But one of the best pitchers, and I mean, look, what do you have? Like 350 wins?
Yeah.
And he pitched like a couple years ago. Feels like.
Yeah. It doesn't feel long ago.
Now you're like, oh, is anyone gonna get 200 wins? Well, he had a shot at 400.
Yeah.
And that was only not long ago.
Yeah.
So just dominant. Just flat out dominant and completely different than a lot of these pitchers on here. The way.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's why and he's just iconic with the soup can accuracy and the Gold Glove on the mound.
Yeah, Greg Maddux. I mean, I will get to him. Don't you worry.
Yes.
But just in short, I mean, everything you said. I mean, the 350 wins, 353. I think I could be wrong, but I think that's the exact number.
I believe so, yeah.
He's for me the embodiment of being able to pick him up in whatever. Pick a year you could throw him, Greg Maddux, and he'll be good. And like you said, the one blip, the playoffs, obviously, is you would like that to be better with someone that had that sort of dominance and pitch accuracy. You'd think that it would just translate, but there's just some guys. It's like an anomaly. It's like the playoffs are just different
bad
thing.
timing, bad luck.
Yeah.
One bad start, you're good for 50 starts in a year, and then you have one bad one. Shane Bieber this year.
Yeah,
it happens.
Yeah,
but, you're not gonna not run him out there.
Yeah. Having Greg Maddux, if you're thinking of your top 5 as a rotation, you have Greg Maddux number 5, you're not going to complain.
No, I'm not going to complain ever. I don't care.
But yeah, like I said, I'll get to him in a little bit. But number 4, to move up the list a little bit into my top 5 here, and my number 4 is Pedro Martinez. Now here's a guy who analytic people love Pedro Martinez. I mean, I've seen him analytic lists put him at number 1, number 2, number 3. I don't put him quite that high because you'll see my top 3 and you'll understand why. And same thing with you. You don't even have Pedro on your list, I don't think. I mean, Pedro Martinez, because people like to also put in the stat of dominant for their era. I think there's that new stat where it's like prime years or whatever it's called.
10 years.
Yeah.
Or whatever. They're 10 years.
Yeah, and when you look at, it's mainly the Red Sox years of Pedro Martinez. It's like the last 1 or 2 with the Expos, but it's really the Red Sox years for Pedro, where it's literally some of the best pitching seasons of all time. The 98, 99 season, 2000 season, stuff like that is some of the best baseball. And in an era where the hitters were some of the best hitting in baseball history. Now, obviously, there's the question of the steroid stuff. It is the era where it was just running rampant and everyone was doing it because you could. So there's obviously the caveat of that. There's the asterisk that you could put next to his name. But I think that Pedro Martinez, and because he's so recent that you really could pick him up and put him anywhere. I mean, if you threw, there's some of these guys, and the next guy I'll get to, certainly, if you threw him in 1920, God knows what stats he'd have. You know what I mean? But Pedro Martinez is like I said, an analytical darling. People really like him. Around the game, he's a good presence around the game. Red Sox fans love him. Yankee fans obviously don't. But, yeah, Pedro Martinez for me, top 5, just a tick above. I mean, just a tick above Tom Seaver for me. But, top 5 otherwise. Number 4.
Yeah, I left Pedro off my list, even out of my honorable mentions. I think he gets a lot of credit for being a well-liked guy, which is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
for being as dominant as he was, to only have 200 and, what'd you say, 12 wins,
It was
219.
Yeah, something like that.
That's a great number. But to be that dominant and not have that many wins, it just shows that his longevity wasn't that great. He had 7 years, didn't have the 10 years. And he was dominant starting in about 97. And he was not dominant after 03. And it just seems weird that steroids were real big there, and they cracked down in about 03. And then he started struggling a little bit. So I always sat weird for me. But, I mean, look at his stats, he's great. But the longevity and some of those question marks kind of kept him off my list here, because I just don't know how you can have, as dominant as he was, and only have 200 wins. And you have someone like Greg Maddux who pitched during the same time. Obviously he lasted a little, longer, but he had 353 wins.
A heck of a lot
Pedro,
more.
they say, had probably some of the best stuff of all time.
Oh yeah.
So it doesn't add up to me. Great pitcher, don't get me wrong. That's why I left him off though. You made too many cases. You could say, well, why'd you have Clemens on there? He had steroids and stuff like that. But it's like, look at his numbers though. 7 Cy Youngs
over a long period of time.
Yeah. And his numbers kind of he did have 10 years. Pedro had like 7. So you can kind of see, and it was right in the steroids period. So that's kind of why I have him off there. But I can't really, I'm not going to argue with you why you put him on there. My number 4, there ain't no arguing.
No
arguing why this man's on here. Another one of my favorite pitchers, if not my favorite pitcher of all time, and that's the big unit, Randy Johnson. He's the greatest left-handed pitcher of all time, hands down. I don't care. Lefty Grove, Carlton, I don't care who you put up there. I really don't. I don't give a shit. He's the best left-handed pitcher of all time. 311 wins, whatever he had. Really wasn't a great pitcher until he was about 30. Won 6 Cy Youngs.
Something like that, yeah.
World Series winner, co-MVP, and just dominant.
Yeah.
Put any lefty batter up there, any lefty batter up there, and he's gonna dominate of all time. Any lefty. That was my thought. He was shutting down lefty hitters. His presence on the mound was unbelievable. The intimidating, the long hair, the 7 foot tall, coming down the mound, slinging it from the dugout, throwing it. I mean, look what he did to John Kruk.
Yeah.
He actually scared a grown man out of the box.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And he's a nice guy. That's the thing. He's a nice guy. It wasn't like, he was mean off the field, too. He's the nicest guy in the world.
Well, that's what they said about Bob Gibson, too. It was the same way.
But on that field, he turned the helmet backwards. Remember when they did that, Larry Walker? He didn't even smile. Like, he was like, okay, he might kill me now. He threw like 100. He handed it to the catcher. I mean, no hitters, perfect games. The image I always remember, and no, it's not the bird hitting the bird. The image I always remember with him was when he had the glove over his head and he always had the eyes and sweating and the long hair. I always remember that, but the one image was the claw. When he threw that no-hitter, was the no-hitter the perfect game?
It might have been the perfect game.
I think it might have. It was
like
41.
late in his career.
And he put the claw up there, and he yelled. He just stuck that glove up, and it looked like a claw. That's the image I always remember of Randy Johnson. He just stuck that up there, and he was like, I'm better than everybody. Still. And then the funny moment, with the bird, kind of funny. Another funny moment I always remember, no one really else remembers, when he was pitching with the Giants. Mid-pitch, the guy blew the tugboat, and he was like, what? Stopped his motion and threw like a lollipop, and they counted the pitch, called it a strike. I always remember that. It's funny. And then after he got his 300th win, he goes, before he left his interview, he goes, all right, 211 more.
Oh, yeah.
Cy Young.
Yeah.
So I always remember those kind of funny things. But that main image when he stuck that glove up there and then pitched on 1 day's rest after 150 pitches in the World Series. I mean, he did rubber band arm.
Yeah.
I mean, he could still pipe pitch. And he was built on velocity, sure, most of it. But that slider from the dugout all the way across the plate, I mean, disgusting. It's just disgusting. He was just, I don't know. I would never want to face him, righty, lefty. I don't care. I would never want to umpire.
No.
There. I was scared if I was in the front row. Like, I might get hit. And I'm okay with that, I guess.
Yeah.
But he was just dominant, disgusting. You can easily put him higher. If you were going for just live ball era, I mean, you put him at number 1, I wouldn't argue with you.
Yeah.
And he's one of my most beloved players I've ever watched.
I know, yeah.
Even he struggled a bit as a Yankee. I don't care. He could have played with the Red Sox. I wouldn't have cared.
That's where I'm at with him, too, is he's one of my favorite characters at baseball, just the presence of Randy Johnson. And this just segues right into my number 3 is Randy Johnson. I'm actually surprised I have him higher than you do. I was very surprised. I thought you'd have him 1 or 2, just because I know you always love Randy Johnson. So I thought
you'll see my 3.
Yeah, it makes
you'll understand why he's not at least 3. Number 1 and 2 is you won't. Well, you'll get. I guess we'll both agree on two, but
Yeah.
one we'll get to a little disagreement there.
Yeah. But just quick on Randy Johnson that you didn't already mention. I mean, yeah, dominant rubber band arm that he slung the ball and just seemed to just get the job done. I mean, the slider from that side, that side release to a lefty with that slider, you're not hitting it. Good luck.
From the dugout, it was coming.
Yeah.
The guy on deck had a shot at hitting it.
I mean, he was awesome. He was awesome to watch. I'm glad we got to watch him. He was on the Yankees for a little bit, even though he kind of didn't do that great in that kind of that era of his pitching career. Yeah, he signed a contract like he was the biggest free agent, and he was 40. So 40, 41. So yeah, what is there more to say about Randy Johnson? He's in my top 3. I think that if like we said, you consider your top 5 rotation, having Randy Johnson as your third guy is fine.
Yeah.
That's your number 3 starter. Fine.
Yeah, intimidating, tough on the mound. No hitters and perfect games and one hitters and
Oh yeah.
World Series. He had it all, and he was good in those big games.
Yep.
And he wasn't really good for his first 8-9 years. He was crazy and wild, and stats weren't there. But when he locked it in, he was something else.
Yeah, he locked it in.
His 10 years were later than a lot of people's 10 years, but they were the best 10 years. They were some of the best 10 years of a pitcher. Just intimidating and a character that really can't be matched. That size and stuff as a pitcher, and just the closest thing I think we see to it really is Chris Sale with the similar.
He is
a
very
little more
similar.
Slingy and more funky delivery, but similar slider and hard velocity, not quite as hard, but similar. That's probably your closest.
Yeah, lanky, lefty, tall, just kind of side.
Never hurt. Randy Johnson was never hurt. He never got hurt. He was fantastic.
Yeah, but that's my number 3. So we're right there.
Yeah, my number 3, and the reason why Johnson's not number 3 is because of this young man, and it's a shame we lost him because you just want them to live forever, especially when they're immortal like these guys, and that's Bob Gibson. The reason I have him number 3, he changed the game, and I'll argue with you, and I don't want to get onto a tantrum here, but I'll argue with you the same reason in basketball. Well, I put Wilt Chamberlain number 1. It's because he changed the game, and he scored 100 points. But
yeah, it helps.
But Bob Gibson changed the game completely. The mound got lowered because he was like the best. 1.12 ERA.
I think so. Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Or you could have went up there with no bat, had a better shot. I bet you could probably put some sort of thing together, and you might have a shot if you went up there with no bat.
Yeah.
He was that dominant, that crazy, didn't care. Get my plate, your box. You stay in your box, I'll stay over my plate. You got something to say? Gone. See you later. Go to first base.
Yeah.
Hit a home run. Don't just walk down to first next at bat. That intimidating, that mean on the mound. Great teammate, off the field, nice guy. But he wanted to win, and he did.
Oh, yeah.
And he was dominant in the playoffs. 17 strikeouts. He didn't care. He wanted to win, and he was just something else. The stories about him, the legacy he had, what he meant for the Cardinals, what he meant to baseball, what he meant to pitching. That's why I got him up there. But, he's iconic. It's a shame we lost him because you just want those guys to live forever.
Yeah.
And in some ways they will. But Bob Gibson, I don't got to really sit here and argue with him for anybody. I got his autograph because I love that man.
Yeah.
And the stories you hear about him are just unbelievable.
Yeah. He's I have him obviously a little lower than you, just 4 spots lower, but I have no problem top 3 pitcher of all time. I mean, like you said, lower the mound. His stuff was just so dominant that, like you said, they had to do something about the mound height and the dominance at which pitchers were performing at that time, specifically Bob Gibson. His performances in the playoffs, at any time you needed him and he was there, and obviously the intimidation factor is high with him. So I already said my piece kind of on him, and I know we've always loved him. So there's no surprise there, and we've talked about it before on the show. So yeah, number 3 is a good spot for him. Having Bob Gibson as your number 3 starting pitcher, it's fine.
That's more than fine.
Yeah, the World Series Game 3, you got Bob Gibson on the bump. That's fine.
Yeah, and then
We're
Randy
good.
Johnson pitching for Game 4.
Yeah,
we got a shot.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
Yeah.
And then he'll pitch Game 5 too.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah. So to move on to my number 2, which is our only same spot that we have on our list here, is Walter Johnson. Walter Johnson, I would think if you look up a lot of people's lists of best pitchers of all time, you often find him at least top 5, at least. I think Walter Johnson is one of the only guys from that era that if you picked him up and put him any year, he translates. the big his fastball apparently for the time was legendary. I mean, nothing you've ever seen. Obviously, at this point in baseball, you got to question it a little bit how they measured fastballs back then.
The height of the mound.
The baseball they were using, obviously it plays a factor, the bats they were using, stuff like that, and just the natural evolution of baseball. But Walter Johnson, I believe, for my list, has the lowest ERA. I believe is just a touch above a 2 ERA for his career. 400 wins, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he's a little over 400 wins.
406, I think, or something.
Yeah, something like that. God knows how many complete games.
All of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's stats that you can't even have anymore. No one's getting 400 wins anymore, let alone 300. No one's getting the 400. And to have a career ERA just a shade over 2. Are you kidding me?
The best relievers don't really even have that.
It's insane. And like I said, I think that if you put him in 2020, I think that Walter Johnson would not only be fine, I think that Walter Johnson would do very well. I think in even today's ball. Yeah. I think that, you give him, I don't know, give him 5 starts and he's out there and he's winning you games.
Sure.
That's what I think. So, you can say your piece on Walter Johnson because, like I said, this is the only part in our list that we agree. But I think it's a pretty sound agreement among a lot of baseball fans, I think.
Yeah, I got him at 2. Just, a lot of people do. A lot of people, you just said his stats. I mean, it's ridiculous. He was, it doesn't make sense what he did. An unbelievable pitcher and an icon that people just, almost like a superhero, like he wasn't real, but he was. Almost like storybook, comical, his stats and what he did. But they're real, like he did them. So Walter Johnson's just a dominant pitching, and he's literally the original hard thrower. And I mean, there's not much else you can say. He's number 2 on my list. He's number 2 on your list, and there's a hell of a reason why.
Yeah, he's awesome. I always like Walter Johnson. The Big Train, I think, was his nickname, right?
Yeah. And longevity again.
Yeah,
he just pitched every day.
Yep.
Whatever, didn't matter. Wind it up and throw it, and
go
home and go back to work. Literally go to work somewhere else, and then come back and strike out another 15 guys and go home.
Yeah, the pitchers back then were a different breed. It's just not you can't even compare it to the guys that pitch now. It's insane.
And that's where my final spot goes. Why I have him there.
Mm-hmm. So number 1 for me, if you've been paying attention to my top 10, I think it's pretty obvious at this point. But number 1 for me is Greg Maddux. I think that Greg Maddux, and you're hard pressed to find Greg Maddux out of anyone's top 5. I think
he's literally 5th on my list. And he could. I don't know.
Yeah, what are you going to say about Greg Maddux?
I can't see him being lower, but I really don't see him being higher on my list because, God, his next guys are just...
I agree.
Look at him.
But my main reason for Greg Maddux, and we talked about him a little bit here, is that, and I've talked about this my entire list, and I'm just going to beat you guys over the head with it, but he is the embodiment of pitching in any era. His pitching will translate to 2100 just as much as it translates to 1890. His style of pitching will never go, out of style. I think for his era, 350 wins, that's like almost next to impossible anymore. And it's not that long ago that he did it. Fielding wise, like you mentioned before, 10 Gold Gloves, I believe is what you said, 10 Gold Gloves. So defense wise, probably one of the best defensive pitchers of all time. That bumps his resume up a little bit. Pitching in an era, his primary pitching years were against some of the best hitters of all time, or some of the best hitting stats of all time. So to contribute all that in, for me personally, I would, if you told me you can only pick one pitcher, he's got to start you a game, it's Greg Maddux. I mean, how do you not? I mean, he threw a complete game with 79 pitches, or if you're hey, it's, say you're playing MLB The Show and you got to pick a guy. It's hey, there are nine hitters. It's Barry Bonds and Babe Ruth and all these guys. Who do you want to pitch? I'm well, Greg Maddux will get it done. It's that style. It's that kind of argument that I make primarily for Greg Maddux. Yeah, that's why he's my number 1.
Yeah, I mean, I already said my piece on Greg Maddux. He's amazing. The guy I got number 1, and we argued about it more before we got going here, is Cy Young. Can you drop him in right now today's game? I don't know because I didn't watch him, or even really you got 2 pictures of the guy, what he even looks like.
It's tough to say with those old guys, yeah.
But you can't tell me that you can't drop him about all the way up to the 80s and he wouldn't dominate. But until, then steroids and velocity really took over. What he threw, I don't know. Walter Johnson, they said, record breaking and stuff like that. He might have threw 82 miles per hour. We don't know.
Yeah.
Cy Young, 511 wins. He has the most wins, the most losses, the most innings. I think he has the most complete games. He has the award named after him. That's pretty impressive. He has won championships and World Series before. He just, there's something about him that actually is not real.
Yeah.
He almost seems not real. And like I said that about Walter Johnson and some of these other guys, but he actually is like not real. Like 500, he has more. I think he has more losses. I think his losses would place him at like the top 5 of wins all time.
Yeah.
Just his losses.
Yeah, he's like 311.
I think he had like 704 complete games or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, his longevity is a big thing. He won championships. The stories you hear about him don't make sense. Like he pitched 18 inning complete games and won nothing, and he scored the run. Like these stories are almost like Babe Ruth. They don't make sense, and that's why I got him on here as number 1 is because he just doesn't make sense. Like how could you argue against his stats? He's the best at his stats, and I mean look at him. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense what he did. Like it's almost like a superhero. It's like you think of pitching, you think of Cy Youngs. Well, how many Cy Youngs does he have? He's Cy Young.
Yeah.
That is Cy Young.
Yeah, that's him right there.
Like he I don't know. I don't know what else you could say about him. I don't know what he would do. I don't know what he did. Would he do? Pitch against Babe Ruth? I don't know what he would do. I don't know what he'd do if he pitched against Ken Griffey. I don't know. But what I do know is whoever the hell he was pitching against, they didn't like him.
Yeah.
Because he was just going to beat you.
Yeah.
He was going to pitch all day, and every day. He's just mystified, a superhero. And obviously his impact on the game, he is the first superstar. And if it wasn't for, Babe Ruth, he'd be right there with him.
Sure.
But Babe Ruth obviously was so much bigger than everybody. He just made him, covered him up there for a reason. But he's part of the first Hall of Fame. I mean, you can go on and on with Cy Young. It's Cy Young. Your sayings about Cy Young, you're making this guy look like Cy Young.
That's where the saying comes from. That young man.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I can see why you put him down there. We argued about it before. I can see why we're not really argued, but debated. I can see why you put him down there. But it's Cy Young. Like I feel like that's actually an honest
argument. Yeah.
Like why'd you put him there? It's Cy Young. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Fair point.
That is Cy Young. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna kind of end with him in that sack. It's Cy Young. So and I'm taking him. I don't know what he looked like. I don't know what he pitched like. I don't even know if he, winded up throwing underhand, throwing his glove. I don't know what he was doing. You're telling me I got a chance to win a game and I got Cy Young on the mound? I feel pretty confident and I feel pretty safe he's going, 15 innings.
I'm just going to say this before we get into... I'm going to get into my honorable mentions for my relievers. If you guys already haven't figured out, it's going to be a little longer episode. But that's what you get.
Relievers, I think, will go a little quicker because...
Sure. Well, I think there's just generally... among all baseball fans, I think there's a general agreement about number 1. Yeah. And I think that after that, it's pretty standard stuff.
We'll roll through relievers a little quicker. Our starters we really liked, and were really hard list to do, so we really wanted to get into it more.
Yeah. But the last word I want to say on Cy Young is that he got his nickname Cy, which is nicknamed after a cyclone, because when he threw the ball and he hit a fence, they said it looked like a cyclone went through, because he would knock the fence over. And that's just the last piece I'm going to say on Cy Young and his legacy.
I believe he was traded for a suit back in the day, too, just to let you guys know that. He was traded for like a suit, like a dress suit. Cy Young was traded. 511 wins was traded for, hey, that's a nice tux right there. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Cy Young.
Yeah. Golly.
God, he's a superhero. Let's move on because I can't keep talking about Cy Young. Well, I could, but I don't want to.
All right, so that's our starting pitching list. And I think that that's a hard list for me personally to make. I'm sure it's a harder list for baseball fans around.
That's why we kind of wanted to spend a little more time on than relievers.
Yeah.
Also, relievers are a little bit more new age.
Yeah, there's a lot more newer, or a lot of people that would listen to this could have either watched them pitch or know them very well. Their dad watched them pitch or whatever, So I only have 5 honorable mentions for my relievers. And they are Jonathan Papelbon. In no particular order, by the way. This isn't like 11 through 15 or anything. Yeah. But Jonathan Papelbon, John Franco, Rob Nen, Craig Kimbrell, and Dan Quisenberry are my honorable mentions for my reliever list.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds good to me. I mean, Some of my honorable mentions are K-Rod, Joe Nathan, Mike Marshall was kind of one of the originator of the relievers, dominant relievers. Hoyt Wilhelm, Sparky Lyle, Eric Gagne. Him didn't put on my list longevity, but I mean, what he did for those couple of years with the steroids were ridiculous. And Kent Tekulve or Tekulve.
Tekulve? Is it LVE? Tekulve?
Yeah,
something like that.
In there, with the Pirates and the conductor hats and the sidearm splitter, he was awesome. Those are some guys I wanted to mention that aren't quite on my top 10, but could have been on the bottom there. But really good pitchers I just wanted to mention there.
Sure. And like I said, I think that if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure our top 5 is exactly the same, just different order, I think. Or no.
I think it's
pretty damn close. I'm going to say
one
that.
Guy off, but
it's
right there.
It's pretty damn close. So my number 10 to start off is one of your honorable mentions is Joe Nathan. I think that when you analyze a reliever list, I'll just make this quick too, because Joe Nathan's pretty fresh in everyone's heads. Joe Nathan, you look at the save amount, longevity, dominance for his era, stuff like that. Joe Nathan really was really good, and there is a bit of a separation in this reliever list of the really goods and then the best. But I think Joe Nathan, if you told me that Joe Nathan's going to try and save you a game, that's going to be fine with me. And like I said, if you really digest his stats as WAR, win-loss, strikeouts, and saves and stuff like that, Joe Nathan does stack up a lot with a lot of these guys. So number 10 for me is Joe Nathan.
Yeah, and I had to mention, again, not the greatest longevity. That's kind of what held him back on mine, but dominant for sure. Number 10 on my list is a legend in the reliever circuit, and that's Bruce Sutter. One of the early on relievers who really made a name for himself as a reliever, and just he was great. Obviously, maybe his saves numbers aren't there, but the amount of innings he could go out there and dominate, and what he could do just impacted a lot of games, and he was fantastic at what he did.
Mm-hmm.
He knew what he did best. He did it best.
Yeah, my number 9 is Bruce Sutter, so I got him just a step higher. But Bruce Sutter, is, I'm pretty sure he's high up the saves list, even though the saves list, the top 2 guys, and then it kind of bellies a little bit, and
it's going to change a lot.
Yeah,
saves, are change, kind of growing. That's why you can't really use saves for these older guys, but.
Yeah, you can't sit here and say, oh, Bruce Sutter's, I don't know, let's just
15th.
Yeah, say he's on the save list. It's like, well, he'll drop down even further as time goes on, I'm sure. But for his time, really well respected, pretty intimidating. He was one of the guys that when he came out, it was like, and there's 2 other guys I don't want to get into after this up my list that were like that too. Around that same time, that it was like, here he comes, and he's going to get 9 outs and win saves. Back then, a lot of the guys got 9 outs, and he was one of the guys you didn't want to see come out of the bullpen. No, never. Straight up. Yeah. So he's, like I said, just one spot above for me. He's number 9.
Yeah, number 9 on my list. You mentioned, and that's Dan Quisenberry. Great name. Yeah. Doesn't get as much credit as I don't think people really give him. Never forget, the images of him in the blue, baby blue Royals. But he was like a slinging, he used to sling the ball, kind of like a sidearm, underhand, weird kind of pitcher, and he was just good.
Yeah.
Long, lanky guy. Yeah. Well, I guess he wasn't really that tall, I don't think.
Well, I'm not sure about his.
I don't remember now, but he was like a skinny kind of.
I know what you're saying.
With the ball in there, and just really was a big part of them Royals teams when they were facing the Yankees there. Big part, because he came out. He came in the game. It was like something you really haven't seen much. Kind of like Tekulve, with the sidearm and the splitter. It was something you didn't really see much then. It was like a specialist who could throw 3 innings. So Quisenberry, I put on there, just really pushed forward the game and how you could throw the ball and stuff like that.
That's what I was just going to say, revolutionized maybe even the reliever position, because a lot of these guys, and like I mentioned with Bruce Sutter, it's back then when the relievers didn't really, the closers was new, it was kind of new age, they didn't really know what to do with them, were they still important to a team? Were they still the guys that you didn't really, because relievers really were the
leftovers.
They were the guys that couldn't be starters. So this is when you start seeing these guys really become important. So Dan Quisenberry fits right into that and revolutionizing the position. And number 8 for me, moving up the list a little bit, I have K-Rod, who I didn't even have him on my list. I didn't even have him. I had him as an honorable mention. But then, as I started to look at his stats and go year by year, and then think back about when I watched him, when he was really, really dominant those years, his stats are pretty damn good.
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
and his ERA specifically jumped out to me because you think about his last 2 or 3 years, he was kind of like he's getting older. You kind of throw him out there. He had like a 5 ERA or whatever. So that's your lasting impact.
He ended up with saves, but he would just always have a high ERA.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for his career, he does have a sub, I believe he has a sub 2.9 ERA, some in the 2.8 area. And for a reliever, that's different from being a starter. Obviously, you would love to have an ERA like that. But for a reliever, it's harder because you come in for that, especially, in this era, you come in for one inning. Say you get the save, but you give up one run, you got a 9 ERA. Right, bang, just for that one game. So it's tough. And like I said, when you look at K-Rod's stats, he even surprised me. Like I said, I wasn't going to have him really anywhere near my list, but after looking at it and thinking back on him and the amount of saves he had, I believe with the
single season record.
Yeah, so I mean, it became hard to keep him off my list, and although I don't have him quite as high as a lot of people maybe would even have him, I think he has earned his spot. Who knows? Maybe in 5 years he's not even on the list. That's where we're going with relievers at this point. So,
yeah.
But for now, number 8 is where I got K-Rod.
Yeah, K-Rod honorable mention for me, and I kind of always liked kind of K-Rod, and always kind of kept up with his career because I always thought he'd be one of those guys who could chase a record. But obviously some other things happened. But number 8 on my list, I think he's on just about everybody's list, is John Franco. Another Met for a lot of his career. Very good pitcher, very 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 good pitcher, and he went through the steroid era too, I believe, in some of his career. But
pretty sure. Yeah.
He was a very good reliever. Just always got saves. Always was consistent. Always just you knew what you were getting, and he was just going to deliver every year in and year out. And he just he had that big junk ball, screwball he had, or
something like that. Yeah.
Very good pitcher. And was a big reason why the Mets were good there for those 90s when he was there. Because he would come out and boom, game was pretty much over. So I had John Franco as number 8 on my list.
Yeah, I'll just put it this way: if you made a top 11 list for me, he's number 11. Sure. I mean, he's just barely didn't crack the list, and like you said, I mean, he's just big for the Mets, big for that era. It helps that he was kind of transitioning to a little bit newer age than Dan Quisenberry and Goose Gossage and these guys, that Bruce Sutter, that era. But he was also transitioning to an era where you have Eric Gagne and K-Rod and Joe Nathan
the real one-inning guys,
yeah,
and the specialist guys.
Yeah, so he's kind of like in between that. He helped move the position even closer to what we got now and what it probably will. I mean, God knows what it'll become in 20 years, but it's what it is now and what it probably will be. But number 7 for me is Billy Wagner, which, I mean...
Billy the Kid.
I mean, unreal lefty. I can't remember, the exact... He was a guy that I didn't have to look at his stats. It was kind of like I just knew Billy Wagner where he's going. So forgive me if I can't cite his exact stats. But I'm pretty sure he's pretty high on the saves list. I know for a fact that he was pretty good high on the strikeouts for relievers. That's
strikeouts per 9.
Yeah, like all those stats were pretty high, and he did have a good WAR, if I remember correctly too, which is becoming a commonplace stat in the discussions for these lists. So yeah, Billy Wagner. I mean, he's a guy that I think just about, with the exception of one more guy, rounds out my more modern relievers. The guys that that we grew up watching and a lot of listeners probably grew up watching and remember fondly. So I think he just about embodies, like I said, with the exception of one fellow, that modern reliever that we've kind of started finally. Everyone's got that one inning dominant guy, or at least you would like to have. And I think Billy Wagner embodies that one inning dominance.
Yeah. He's one of the first pitchers I ever remember throwing 100 miles per hour and just whipping the ball in there. A small guy too.
Yeah.
Great pitcher. I picked up kind of from Franco. The Mets kind of left off, and you had Billy Wagner who kind of filled the role. Pitched great with the Astros. He's on the Hall of Fame ballot. Hopefully he gets in the Hall of Fame because I think he deserves it.
Sure.
Because you always want a Billy Wagner in your bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the story with him goes too. He was a right-handed pitcher, broke his right arm, and then became a left-handed pitcher and was throwing 100 miles per hour.
Jesus.
I believe that's the story with Billy Wagner.
Wow.
I'm almost positive to go back and look it up, but I believe that's the story with him. But just a great pitcher, and I'm going to get into him very shortly here. But my number 7 on my list is Lee Smith. Lee Smith was a big guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big guy. He was a presence on the mound.
Sure was.
And intimidating, threw hard, splitter, forkball, I think it was, or something.
Yeah.
There was something, but he was really good. I mean, he is some dominant bullpen. I mean, he might have some of the best reliever years you've ever seen, we'll ever see.
Mm-hmm.
And he was great. And with the Cubs and the Cardinals, the Orioles,
The Red Sox, I'm pretty sure.
yeah, he pitched a long time, a lot of games, and he was really good. And he really was a detail or visionary of a reliever.
Yeah.
You think of a reliever, you kind of think Lee Smith.
Yeah, Lee Smith always comes to mind. He's got
threw
to.
hard, got out there, intimidating. This is what I do. I throw my fastball. Here's one splitter. Here's my fastball. That's what he did, and that's what relievers do. And he kind of embodied that. And you were like, okay, let me go find some Lee Smiths.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what you did, and that's why I have him number 7 on my list, and also up the saves list still as well on his career.
Yeah, that's I have him number 6, so he just goes right into my guy for number 6. But I believe he's top 4, top 5, maybe even top 3 in saves. I can't remember the exact saves list in my head right now, but he's up there, 400 some odd saves, kind of similar to who I will talk about in number 5, the similar era of the 3 inning save guy. And like you said, it's a 7th inning. Say you're down by 2 runs and Lee Smith's coming in the game. It's like, well, got 3 innings to try to figure this guy out. That's a tall order.
And
back
threw hard.
Sure did.
And he's big. Come down that mound a long ways.
Oh yeah. So yeah, Lee Smith for me, number 6. Just that shade above Billy Wagner. And I know, I remember who you got for number 6 now.
Yeah. And my number 6. We haven't talked about him yet, right?
No.
That was Billy Wagner.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just one of the few guys that I remember as a kid who just threw really, really hard. Mets fans really liked, and people around baseball really liked, but never really gave him as much credit. I think he's finally starting to get some credit. That's why I think he's starting to get on some Hall of Fame ballots. But he was one of the first people I remember throwing really, really hard. Up there with Randy Johnson, of course, but Joel Samaya, people remember, like 100 miles per hour.
Oh yeah.
So, but Billy Wagner is 6 on my list, and we don't go into it much, but great pitcher, and I love to have Billy Wagner on my team.
Yeah, it's funny how I had Billy Wagner 7, Lee Smith 6th, and then you just had it flipped. It's just like how close this reliever list really is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But still, starting with my top 5, my number 5 guy is Goose Gossage, who is just, oh my God, talk about intimidating and talk about
crazy.
He's still nuts. So
More nuts.
Imagine that. Same thing, like I said with Lee Smith. It's like I said, it's the same era where you have that 3 inning reliever. You got this guy throwing. I'm pretty sure he threw 100. A legendary.
He would wind all the way back.
Oh yeah, he would.
And whip it arm around. He was flying his whole body around.
Yeah,
big mustache. And
he brought that fastball down from the clouds.
Yeah.
He brought that thing up.
And his slider would come from behind you. And
yeah, he. I mean, you're hard pressed to find a top 5 reliever list without Goose Gossage, because I think that Goose Gossage, out of those old guys, probably revolutionized the reliever coming in and giving it all you got, for that time that you're out there. I think he really spearheaded that revolution of relievers.
Pitches.
Yeah, that's
all he needed.
Yeah, you got the fastball and the slider. Good luck. That's what he did. And a lot of times, you saw those legendary bouts with George Brett of the Royals. It was like, here's my fastball. Good luck. Yeah. It's 100 miles an hour. It may even come right down the pipe. Good luck. Hit it.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, he was. I have him on my list. He's right here on my list in top 5. So, I think the story that resonates with me with him is, I believe, a game against the Orioles. He was on the mound, and he was winding up, doing his big wind up, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And the lights went out, and Eddie Murray was at the plate, and these 2 guys were intimidating. I think it was Lou Piniella, and I can't think who it is, but 2 infielders. I think Lou Piniella.
Craig Nettles.
It might have been Lou Piniella was told the story, but anyway, they were ducking. They were on the ground with their hands over their heads because, got Eddie Murray at the plate. You got Goose Gossage mound throwing 100 miles per hour, not knowing where it's going. And the lights came back on. They looked up. There was Goose Gossage standing on the mound with the ball. And Eddie Murray was still in the batter's box, never moved, never came out of his batting stance. And this is a guy who threw 100 miles per hour, had no clue where it was going. So I thought that was just, it was a funny story. I had Goose Gossage in it, really told more about Eddie Murray, but Goose Gossage was involved and just kind of showed that he was crazy. The infielders were like, I'm not getting involved in this.
Yeah.
But Goose Gossage is crazy, electric, big part of the Yankees, and again changed the reliever role forever.
Yeah, sure.
So, and still throws his 2 cents in.
Always.
To this day and age. But my number 5 is a guy that we watched extensively, and that's Trevor Hoffman. A guy that doesn't excite you. You see his name, it doesn't excite you. But you know what he did.
Yeah.
A lot of saves. Again, postseason success, not quite there. Padres, of course, not quite have much of a chance. Great pitcher. He pitched with whatever he had. Change up, he was big, didn't throw hard. But again, accuracy and being good at the mound and fielding position and knowing the game got him the second most saves, and at one time the most saves, 602, I believe. So great pitcher. I got him at 5 just because he didn't have that electric jump off the page. When you see him, even though he's one of the greatest relievers, second all time in saves, he just didn't like Trevor Hoffman. You're just never like, really excite you, like we mentioned before. So
yeah, I'll get to him in just a sec more, but if you look up in the dictionary, Bugs Bunny changeup, that's what he had. I mean, his changeup is legendary.
Windup was, kind of, people always remembered it was because it was a little different, even though it was kind of simple, but it was a little different. Leg kick was kind of extended a little bit, kind of slow at first, and then kind of boom, right there.
You could pick out his, like if you shadowed out, someone throwing the ball, you could always pick him out.
He was intimidating on the mound. Not much of a smile, just kind of, lunch pail kind of guy. Showed up, here's, boom, boom, 3 outs, let's go home.
Yeah. You didn't want to hear, if you were the opposing team, you didn't want to hear Hell's Bells and then have him come out. Let's be honest, So, yeah, like he said, or like I've been saying, the top 5 is pretty self-explanatory with these next guys we'll talk about. But like I said, I'll get to him in a sec. Number 4 for me is Raleigh Fingers. Raleigh Fingers is legendary for quite a few reasons. Not only his mustache and his personality, he's got a great personality. Still is big around the game. Always does the softball game. I'm pretty sure in the celebrity softball game before the All-Star game. Raleigh Fingers. I mean, regardless of all that, you look at him and you love the mustache and the personality and everything. But man, was he a good pitcher. I mean, he was. Talk about dominant, and talk about a guy that kind of filled innings and filled roles he always struck me as a guy with kind of a rubber arm. He kind of like, there's another guy that we'll both get to in a sec, but he, pretty sure he had a pretty devastating forkball, fastball combination, kind of off-speed fastball combination. And, I mean, the guy just, for me, always reminds me of, like, the lead up to, like, a Dennis Eckersley. You don't have some of these guys without Raleigh Fingers, if that makes any sense. And not so much the Goose Gossages and the Lee Smiths of the world that took that position and took it and made it modern. I think that Raleigh Fingers on the mound and his stuff, I think, was an inspiration, and not so much an inspiration, but the blueprints for a lot of these guys.
Sure.
Is the best way I can put it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into Raleigh Fingers too much because he's on my list here in a short bit, so I'll get into him then. But just iconic. I'm going to leave it at that for this short period here because I'm going to get to him in a second here. But number 4 on my list we just talked about was Goose Gossage. I'm not going to go into it again. Electric, iconic, and built the foundation of relievers.
Sure.
If you can find yourself a Goose Gossage to this day, you're in great shape.
Oh yeah.
So, that's my number 4 on my list. I mean, like I said, we already kind of talked about him. So
yeah, he's nuts. I love Goose Gossage. How do you not love Goose? Even though he's not a big fan of all the modern.
Some of his stuff he says and the way he says it is.
Yeah, I can always kind of pick out his intention,
like,
even though he says it.
Grandpa.
Yeah.
Sometimes he says it crazy, and I agree with some of the stuff, but he just says it a little too like harsh and.
Yeah, he's an old school guy.
Yeah.
Put it that way. So to move on, a guy that you have on your list already. For me, I just put him just a little higher. Is Trevor Hoffman, number 3. To go back to my starting pitching argument, Trevor Hoffman, pitching how he wasn't obviously the most dominant. We'll get to the most dominant in just a sec here for that era, but with the amount of saves he had, the longevity, the stuff, the legendary changeup, and that intimidation factor coming out of the bullpen with the Hell's Bells and everything like that, I think he kind of encapsulates all of the things that a reliever should encapsulate. he's got the dominant one pitch, he's got the out pitch, he's got the intimidation with the entrance, and the save amount. Obviously, you can't ignore. He's number 2, which who knows? God knows how the list will change over time, but for now, you can't ignore it. And I think that Trevor Hoffman, going back to my starting pitcher argument, could put him in the 70s, could put him in the 80s with the other relievers, and Trevor Hoffman would be one of the best in any context. So that's kind of why I have him top 3 for me. He's my 7th inning guy, I guess.
Yeah. So my number 3, we haven't mentioned yet, surprisingly, and that's Dennis Eckersley. What the heck? He was like Goose Gossage, kind of similar windup, really. Kind of winged the ball in there.
Yeah.
A guy who, early in his career with the Indians, threw a no-hitter. So, a relief pitcher, one of the best relief pitchers all time, threw a no-hitter.
Yeah.
So, people don't really talk about that much, but great reliever. And people really give him his credit, really, I guess, or remember most for giving up the home run to Gibson, which is really weird because he was dominant. He won a bunch of World Series with the A's and threw a no-hitter. I mean, he was just great. He didn't really throw that hard, but he could spot it. He knew when to throw his fastball. He had the slider. He was similar to Goose Gossage. He had a little bit more of a leg kick, kind of like, herked his leg and kind of lowered his head, and then kind of a little bit of a sidearm 3/4 delivery.
Yep.
But good, very, very, very good. 9 outs, 10 outs, 12 outs. Who doesn't matter. Consistent and just intimidating. Really, these things, when you see these guys, you can see like an outline of them. Or like a the hair and the mustache. You know exactly who they are.
Yeah.
They're iconic to the game. And he's still in the game, and he does a great job with the game and broadcasting the game. And he was playing, man, and intimidating, just mean. Had that Randy Johnson mean, look on his face, and he was just fantastic. And I got him at number 3 here, and he could easily be. You could probably really fight him for number 1, but. Or 2, but I got him 3 here, and he's fantastic, and I love Dennis Eckersley, and he just he fit the A's. He really felt like those when he had the yellow and the lime green. He just kind of felt like that was him. So, and it's a shame that he kind of gets remembered for Kirk Gibson's home run, but yeah, he's probably one of the best relievers, and he's one of the most memorable.
Yeah, well, I mean I got him at number 2, so I just got him just that one spot above. I got him right under the pretty obvious pick at this point. But yeah, like I'm pretty sure he was there for the 3-peat with Oakland in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm pretty sure he was there, or at least for one of them. Like you said, the gold and the lime green and that kind of almost sidewinder type delivery that he had, and the movement on his ball, and he wasn't gonna blow up by you like Goose Gossage, but he was gonna pick you apart, in the at bat. And
the fist pump
that
after you strike you out.
People hated that. Batters really didn't like that, and I think that he drew a lot of ire from a lot of batters because he wasn't. I've seen interviews with him. He said he wasn't doing it to like, yeah, I got you. He was doing it as like he was pumped up, like he just struck out. He struck you out for his team. He was close to getting a win, so he didn't do it more as like a Randy Johnson like fuck you. Like it was kind of like a it was like he was just that pumped up. He was that on the mound, but people took it like that. But yeah, the Kirk Gibson moment, what I think makes that Kirk Gibson moment for me, and maybe not a lot of people think this way, but not only did he do it with a broken leg, but he hit it off Dennis Eckersley. He hit it off, for me, the second best closer of all time.
In his prime.
In 1988, which is, like you said, that's his prime. So that for that moment, even though it is to the detriment of Dennis Eckersley, it just makes that moment bigger in baseball, is that this guy is shut down in 99% of the time that he goes out there, Yeah. So, that's who I got number 2.
Yeah, who I got number 2, who we just mentioned, is Raleigh Fingers. There's something about lefties. He always said weird, lefties were weird in baseball. They're just weird people. Relievers are weird. There's something about them. They all got mustaches. They're all crazy. Brian Wilson had the big beard. But back then, you all had mustaches. Goose Gossage, the handlebars all the way down. You had Eckersley with the crazy mustache, and Raleigh Fingers with the twirled mustache, the classy, boxer with his fists out kind of mustache. But he was fantastic, and his image is lasting forever. His image will be in baseball forever because that mustache is just it's iconic forever. No one will ever really repeat it. It will never ever get repeated in baseball and have that much impact. His mustache, I think, could have. You could argue his mustache has more impact and more memorable than the pitcher himself.
Yeah.
That's the craziest thing. Raleigh Fingers, I loved. got his autograph. He's fantastic.
I'm looking up a picture of him right now. I just got to look at it. I love it.
It's fantastic. It's perfect. It's a perfect mustache, And he's just a great pitcher. He really was a 3-inning guy. I think he won an MVP or Cy Young at like 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fantastic pitcher with the A's, of course, and then with the Brewers. Lovable guy. Still lovable. I watch him in the celebrity softball game every year. Hit the home runs, and everyone loves him. He still has the mustache. It's just something about him. You gotta love him. And he could easily be like 4 or 5, but I got him at 2 just because his impact and how iconic he is almost trumps how good he was. And that's what's crazy. You always remember him. Everyone knows who he is.
Yeah.
Everyone knows, maybe not knows exactly who he is, but he knows the mustache. You go, hey, that guy had it for baseball, right? Riley Fingers, yeah.
Yeah.
And a great name.
Yeah.
Riley Fingers. I mean, he's just always an old school boxer. I don't know. I love Riley Fingers. And
Yeah.
fantastic pitcher and fantastic mustache.
Yeah. Dominant guy.
Yeah.
I mean, without further ado, number 1 is Al Raboski for the Mad Hungarian.
Oh.
No, not him.
I love that guy. So
He's nuts. I love him. No, number 1, obvious. I really do think it should be everyone's list that this guy's number 1. Mariano Rivera, the best closer of all time, the only unanimous Hall of Famer, which obviously is controversial, but it is what it is. Saves leader, 1 pitch. That's all you need is that cutter. I believe.
Starter.
And kind of a
no-hitter.
failed starter at that, right? I mean, yeah, and I believe that the stat is that more men have been on the moon than Mariano Rivera's given up runs in the postseason. So it's not even just the dominance, like Trevor Hoffman, like the dominance in the regular season, but maybe didn't translate, or Greg Maddux from my starting list maybe didn't translate to postseason, but boy, oh boy, did it translate for Mariano Rivera to the postseason. Obviously, there's the famous hiccups with the 0-4 to the Red Sox, and obviously Game 7 of the 0-1 World Series. There's the famous,
And that's the thing with that. It's like when he messed up, it's like some of the most memorable games of baseball ever seen.
Because it's Mariano Rivera
and
giving
Yankees.
up. Yeah. That obviously contributes to it. But, this guy, you only can think of maybe those 2 and then a few more minor blemishes in his postseason career. But boy, I mean, he's unhittable. He was unhittable for his time, and more comparable to the Billy Wagners and the more modern relievers on these lists. He did it in an era where you did have some of the best hitting, and that cutter, you knew it was coming, and you were still going to break your bat over it. It's insane. Mariano Rivera is insane.
Yeah, I got Mo as my number 1 here. Consistency, longevity. I don't really know how many times he led the league in saves. I don't think he really did that many times.
No, he
was
wasn't.
just the longevity in the career. I mean, did he being on a great teams help? Sure. Did he make that team great? Yes. Did he make that team World Series? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did he make that team go round? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Was he ever in trouble? Did he found himself out of the media? He was a likable guy and iconic. The Sandman, quite iconic.
Mm-hmm.
That All-Star game at Citi Field, when they let him go out there by himself. The images of Pettit and Jeter coming out and taking him out of the game. I mean, they're iconic moments.
Mm.
The greatest closer. Now, unanimous Hall of Famer, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
He is just a closer. He came out and pitched 1 inning, and his impact in the first 8 innings, you might not even use him. So, unanimous, I don't think. Also with guys like Babe Ruth and Ken Griffey and Randy Johnson, Nolan Ryan, guys like that, how they're not unanimous Hall of Famers. Mm-hmm. I find it hard you can make him a unanimous Hall of Famer. Yeah. But the way I like to put it is to tie this all together. Cy Young won 511 games. Mariano Rivera closed, 652?
Something like that,
and
yeah.
80-something wins.
Mm-hmm.
When he was on the field, when he entered a game, his team won more times than any other person's team when they entered a game. Because Cy Young had, impacted 511 games with a win.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, he impacted no decisions and stuff like that. But with wins, he technically impacted 511 with wins.
Yep.
So his team won when he pitched 511 times. Mo's team won about 720 times when he touched the field. That I find, which no one really thinks about, quite impressive.
Yeah. That
when he touched the field, he was a part of 720 wins. That he actually has a stat to credit, not no decisions and stuff like that. That he has a stat to credit it.
That's the thing, is you can literally say, and he's the closer. So it's not even so much, I mean, obviously Cy Young basically just complete games and would do the whole game, but Mo literally secured that win for the team, you know.
So that's what I'm saying. When he touched the field, you could see it in his stats. That's how many times he actually won a game or contributed and finished a game off when their team won when he was on the field that many times that he actually got credit for. Cy Young 511, Mo like 730. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's something I always thought was crazy, and the fact that he's like fifth on the all-time Yankees wins list.
Something like that, yeah.
Like 86 or something like that. A fantastic pitcher. Broken bats is his specialty, and the cutter is iconic. Except Edgar Martinez is the only guy who can hit it all the time. But just he was fantastic and iconic, and the delivery, the motion, the cutter, the Sandman. I don't know if he changed baseball because the reliever role was already there, but you're always going to look for that Mo, and he's like one of them guys you're never going to find once in a generation. It might take 50 years before you see another guy like Mo.
Yeah.
You might never get another guy like Mo.
Yeah.
And that's what puts him at number one.
Yeah. Same here. He's like, you have the whole list, and there is quite a jump between 1 and 2, or, the rest of the list is Mo's like kind of up there. He's in a class of his own. Yeah. So that's, like I said, kind of alluding to the whole list as a whole. I think he's pretty much a foregone conclusion for a lot of baseball fans, at least right now. You never know where we're at in 10, 15, 20 years, but that's where we're at right now. He's the guy. Yeah. He's it.
Yeah. And I can't argue that. The only thing I can argue with him is the unanimous thing. I didn't really like that. And I understood it to an aspect, but I just didn't like the unanimous. It just didn't. Ugh.
I think the unanimous speaks more to the fact that he's the best at his position, and it's probably one of the few times that you got to vote knowing that, if that makes any sense.
And he locked that position.
Yeah.
If that position was ever not like, hey, is the reliever ever going to go away? Like, is the closer really make that big? He locked it in. Like, we need them.
Yeah, I agree.
That's pretty much it with our lists. It's been kind of a while here this episode. I think as the other ones go, we'll have an understanding on how to glide through them a little easier. But
plus, I mean, we're off a week, and it's this is your only episode for 2 weeks, so make it a little longer. Can't hurt,
Yeah. And obviously it's hard when you get starter pitchers. There's 1,000,000 of them.
Yeah, some of the other lists are probably going to be a little easier, I would think.
So, but to go along with this, we have our trivia question. It's back, and that is, who's got the most games pitched in MLB history? Who entered the game the most times in MLB history as a pitcher?
I got close, but I couldn't get it.
Yeah, and it's kind of surprising for most people, I think, and that's Jesse Orosco, who pitched forever. I believe his rookie year was 79, and he finished in 2003, I believe.
Something like that.
And he was 46 years old. He was still pitching. He pitched for the Yankees and some other teams. He had 1,252 games pitched.
Christ almighty.
Let's say 162 game season. I mean, what is that?
It's like
9.
God, yes.
Like 9 full seasons.
9 seasons where you came in and pitched every day.
Yeah. So, and he really had a pretty good career. I think he had like a 3.1, 3.2 career ERA as a reliever. So, but yeah, he holds the record for the most career games pitched in MLB history. It's Jesse Orosco with 1,252 games pitched.
Yeah, it's surprising. I didn't even. I mean, when you said it, obviously it made sense, but he just didn't cross my radar when I thought about the guys. I got closest with Mike Stanton. That was my closest guess, but yeah, that's 1,252. I mean, can you imagine his arms? I hope his arm's okay.
Yeah, that's a lot of games.
Mm-hmm.
That's like 9 straight seasons of just here I am every day.
Yeah, and then think.
He was 46.
Yeah,
that's impressive in his own.
Think about all that time playing every day like that, and Cal Ripken did it like 1,500 more times straight. Just to go on a tangent with that, because that's what it made me remind me of is Cal Ripken's streak. But yeah, imagine being a reliever and coming in every day for even just an inning. And just, oh, God.
Yeah. So.
The poor man.
Yeah. Well, that's a trivia question.
It's a good one.
And that's our first episode of our top players all time. Next week is first base, catchers, and DH.
Yeah.
So it is 3, so we'll have to try cruising along a little bit.
DH will be quick. I think DH we both kind of.
And I think catcher, you got a lot of names are kind of.
Catching will be
on there already. You just kind of got to place them.
Yeah, I think all 3 positions I have like my top 3.
First base is deep.
Mm-hmm.
Catching, I think you kind of know your guys. DH is going to be kind of pretty quick because it's more of a new position.
Mm.
First base is so deep and so dominant. It's going to be tough, but I think we'll be in the same spot, I think.
Mm.
But
yep.
That's our next episode, and that'll be in 2 weeks.
Yep, it'll be in 2 weeks.
So But yeah, I'm excited to continue going with this because it's great just to see the names, hear the names, talk about them and the history, and we'll try to have a trivia question that kind of goes along with it. And it's just great to kind of continue to talk baseball and talk about the history of it because I think baseball is almost more about the history than it is of the current. Like I said weeks ago, you always talk baseball 10 years ago. You never really, it seems like you never talked now baseball. It's like, well, 10 years ago, you're always talking in the past of baseball. So in 3 years from now, we'll be talking about this, and then 3 years later, you'll be talking about, you know what I mean? You're always like 5 years behind or so. So that's why I always think with baseball. It's so much more about the history than it almost is about the what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
think of some other sports.
I mean, think about what this list could look like if it was like a sport like football. If you were trying to make a best running back list, it's just changing like every 5 years. There's just a new list or like a new, at least bottom of the list.
And the records are always getting broken because the game's getting changed.
Yeah.
And these records, they're not breaking.
You're not breaking Cy Young's record. I can tell you that right now.
No, any of them.
You're not getting close to his loss amount with your wins. So.
So I don't think you. I don't know. I don't think anyone will have as many decisions as he had losses.
I know.
That's ridiculous. It's crazy how baseball is like that. When it's like, oh, the old records get broken, but not these ones.
No.
And baseball's crazy. The history of baseball is unbelievable. It's a history all its own, and it's something no other sport can repeat or duplicate. I don't know what else can really. Closest maybe is maybe college football because that goes back to 1860s and 50s and maybe hockey.
Yeah.
But hockey I don't think has the popularity as baseball does.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite like college football you said goes back that far, but it's a little more niche. Like I think you have to be not only into football but be into football so much that you're going into the college space. If that makes
it's almost like you don't know it because it's like it's weird.
Plus, it's only really think about it at most you got a 4-year career in playing at that level in college, so it's not like you get 20 years of Ken Griffey. It's like you only got 4 years of Tim Tebow. It's like so.
So that's why doing these lists are going to be exciting, and I'm pumped up to continue going with them.
Yeah, I'm excited because there's got some good lists, and there's some lists that when I think about it, I don't know where to place some guys, so I'm excited to get more into it. But that about wraps up our inaugural episode of our Round the Horn all-time list. So like we said, next week we'll go catching, first base, and DH, the 2, 3, and whatever number you want to put on DH position, 0, whatever the hell. So we'll bring you with that, and then after that we'll do middle of the infield and outfield and all that great stuff. So unless you have anything else, I'm going to wrap this thing up and put a bow on it.
That's it.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. You can listen to this podcast every week on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can listen to this podcast on our regularly updated YouTube channel, as well as our website, screwball.podbean.com. You can follow me on Twitter at RealMikeLepre. You can follow me on Instagram at Mike Lepre.
And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at FDubs10.
You can follow our official Screwball Twitter at ScrewballPod. You can follow our official Screwball Facebook at ScrewballPod. No E and Screw. And that's it from us, guys. We'll see you next week.
Yep, take care.